Alright guys, Tactical here back again today. Hope you're enjoying your Wednesday so far, and today I wanted to discuss which pros could be next out the retirement door, because Karma, of course, retiring last week, pretty much the highest profile retirement we've had in Call of Duty really ever. You could talk about Nature back in the Advanced Warfare days, but pretty much Karma's the biggest name retirement we've had in a very long time. Could this set the precedent of other players going into retirement as well? It's pretty interesting, right, as it seems like it's geared up for Karma to join this NRG organization, maybe as a content creator or whatever. No announcement or confirmation on that quite yet, but if that does indeed happen, that would make sense. And when we look at these other players we're going to talk about today, do they have a similarly well-defined next step they could move into? Intrigued to hear your thoughts down below as always. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you are new. Played with the lighting a little bit today, so hopefully that's a little bit better as well. Let's hop into things then. So the last few days we talked about Twitter drama. Once again, we get a little piece of it, but I didn't want to focus the video around it once again today. But Octane says to Vivid yesterday, so of course, Seattle Surge, or the Octane squad, against, well, Vivid the Warrior on the LAG. They've had some interesting back and forths. Seattle 4-0 over the first course of the season. Then most recently, LAG actually beat the Seattle Surge when they had a pretty horrible event, and then Karma, decides to retire. So Octane says the following: Yo, why do you sketch on our scrims? I heard you say you beat us one time and we're ass now at Vivid the Warrior. Here's the attention you wanted. This is the best you could do. Damn, actually mad. Wasn't going to reply at all just to make you even more mad. You choked up when you batted, I can tell. Guy doesn't even know how the sport works. He thought I had to hit it with the ball a few days ago. So yeah, a bit of interesting back and forth. It just spices up this rivalry, I suppose, a little bit more. Seattle versus LAG. Will we see this again in future? It's honestly kind of unlikely because I don't think they're in the same group together anymore, because they were pretty much the entire first part of the season. I don't think that's happening again. And can I imagine both of these teams making out of their group in future events? Like, that's pretty unlikely as well. So maybe we won't see that matchup again. Maybe 11 at Champs or something like that. So let's talk about potential retirements. Karma comes out last week, and this statement was released by the Seattle Surge. He is officially off the team. He said at the time he does not plan to come back, possibly as a coach or something like that. That definitely could be a possibility, right? And a guy like Karma, given his accomplishments, 3-time world champion, the only one still to date in Call of Duty, going forward, he's got so many options on the table. His stream is very successful, of course, been on OpTic Gaming for a long time, got a big fan base in that sense. A lot of people who followed Seattle followed them because of Damon Karma Barlow, right? So obviously he had a lot of different options. In terms of his reasons for retirement that we discussed at the time, like, he wasn't the player he once was, and he talked about how, he had some motivation issues getting on and playing this game all the time. Probably made sense for him to say, look, okay, I'm not the player that I used to be back in the Black Ops 2 days. I've played all these different roles throughout my career. I've basically achieved everything there is to achieve, and I have some clearly well-defined next steps, I suppose, potentially going to content for an RG or other options, maybe coaching a team or something like that, right? Clearly there's next steps for Damon, and also could potentially be an analyst on the desk, right? That's another possibility that we could potentially see. So Karma has so many options potentially ahead of him, and given like he's achieved everything, makes sense for him to retire given the shambles of a squad that he was on with the Seattle Surge. However, when we look at some other players, do they have the similar situation to Karma? So this comment was on the Karma retirement video a few days ago from Jack Birchie. Maybe I'm not pronouncing that right, my apologies if you're watching the video, but he talks about some retirees that he may expect to come up over the next couple of seasons. Eggs, JCap, Looney, Enable, and even Scump were mentioned, and I definitely think there's a good reasons for mentioning these players. So let's have a look at the entire league right now and what we could potentially be seeing next on screen. This is from CoD Gamepedia, linked down below. So let's just go through chronologically, I suppose, or at least alphabetically, starting with the Atlanta FaZe. I don't see any changes really being made here. I can't imagine any of these guys are looking to retire anytime soon. So let's just move on to the Huntsmen. Now, this is pretty interesting, right? Because you've got Embos on the substitute bench, and, a possibility here is that, look, Embos is not like he's going to play this season. It's very unlikely. Do Chicago want to continue him on as a substitute next season, or will they go some other route and potentially get an amateur player that might have proved himself more through the challenger side? If they go that route, then is Embo's going to have a substitute potential position? Arguably not, and therefore that might be a retirement there. But then again, Embo's kind of came out of retirement to even be on the substitute bench, so not sure that really counts. I guess the other one you could talk about potentially is Scump, right? He talked a while ago, I think I made a video maybe a year ago now, I don't know, saying that Scump says that he has 3 or 4 years left, or 2 or 3 years left, something like that, before he's thinking of retiring. And yes, it's just an interesting one with Scump, because he's achieved everything there is to achieve. He's still a good player, but he's not exactly a spectacular player. No one has him in their like top 5, top 10 conversation really like they used to back in the past. So, with all that being considered, obviously they were still winning championships. And if you're a team that's still winning events, then of course there's no reason for you to go really. But if Huntsmen fall off and have a difficult season next season, as they kind of did in Black Ops 4 and in the World War II season, of course, then maybe that's something you consider. Because, of course, Scump with his massive stream, massive personality, massive following, so many opportunities for him to potentially go into full-time content and go back to YouTube more often and all this kind of stuff, especially if, well, it's just a difficult one, right? Because if he enjoys the game, like the Call of Duty game of the particular year, of course, he'll want to play it professionally. But if he doesn't enjoy the game, then would you want to retire and then be forced to make content on that game that you don't necessarily enjoy? It's a difficult one. If Scump's still winning championships, I don't see him retiring really anytime soon. But over the next few years, it could be possible. Because the next team we're going to look at, of course, is the Dallas Empire. And Clayster, the oldest player in the league, but still winning championships at the tender age of like 27. I think he's 27, maybe he's even 28 now. And Crimsix is like 26 as well. So yeah, all that considered, like these guys are doing incredibly well given their age. I think Kambo also just turned 26. So yeah, that kind of puts things into perspective, given that how well Clayster and Crimsix are still performing. In a similar way to Scum, like, unless these guys significantly fall off in terms of their performances or their teams are no longer competing for championships, then I imagine they will consider retirement because, again, these guys have great opportunities after they move on with their career. Analysis, coaching, you know, streaming, all these kind of options are certainly there for these guys, and that's something to consider when you look at retirement, because when we look at a guy like Axen second year, does he necessarily have, well, he doesn't necessarily have the streaming and the Twitch background to easily fall back on, like the likes of Clayster and Crimsix do in this case. Tommy could also be a guy to look at. He's been on the sub bench this season. I think he played up pretty much all the world championships before this one this season. So yeah, it's looking very unlikely he'll perform at that one unless they have to make some sort of strange substitute change. But of course, Tommy's been streaming a lot. He's still a substitute right now. I'm sure he wants to come back to competing. He definitely enjoys it, but at the same time, is that opportunity really going to be there? Are they going to want to keep him on the sub bench next season? Are they going to maybe put him into like an analysis type of role alongside Rambo Ray while he still streams? That's an option as well, but you know, we'll have to see going forwards. Don't really think anything applies to Florida here. Royal Ravens as well, you could maybe look at likes of MattG and Rated and these guys that might not get their opportunity again, but I imagine that will happen at some point. I don't really see any reason for these guys to retire. Then again, Joe retired last season to become the coach, so, you know, could Rated follow in a similar route? It's possible, but, you know, where are the opportunities really? And I think he definitely still has the drive to make something work. Then you've got LAG, right? And a lot of the names that people are going to be talking about, right, is Patty P. Eggs, because dropped to the bench earlier this season, doesn't really look like he has too many opportunities to come back into the starting lineup. Maybe it's possible, right? Like Spart's on the bench now, Saints is back in the starting team. But, you know, look at this squad and it's like, where does Eggs really fit in here? Would he do better as like a coaching role alongside Ricky? Definitely a possibility, you can argue, right? So, look, it's a shame really because Eggs just dominated the scene back in the day. Such a great personality to have in the scene. He's been more active on Twitter lately as well. But will he get another shot in the starting lineup? To me, seems somewhat unlikely, at least over the next couple of months towards the end of the season. Next season, maybe it's possible again if the game kind of suits him, but this season he just wasn't performing well enough. Will LAG take that risk on him? Who knows, right? But when you consider Aches' options going forwards, if he does retire, it's not so clear, right? Is there a spot on the analysis desk for him to come into? Is that really the direction he wants to go? Does he want to go into coaching? Because we talk about a guy like Jacob in a second. But if you take the leap and you say, look, I'm going to go coach, it's very difficult for you to get back in the scene. Yes, we did see it with Crowder coaching the FaZe Clan team back in the day, came back to the FaZe Clan starting lineup in World War II and won a championship. But now, you know, franchising, things are a little bit more set in stone. If you take the leap with your organization and say, look, I'm opening to coaching, then that might be your playing career done, right? And I'm sure these guys are super competitive. They don't want to retire unless they feel like they absolutely have to. So, Eggs is definitely a possibility. Will it happen at the end of this season? Will it happen next season? Who knows? But I definitely think that is relatively likely over the next season or so. That may well be the next one. Don't really think this applies to the Rocker at all. Subliners in a similar vein, really, I don't think this applies. You know, Center is something to consider, but he did do this tweet yesterday saying, 1,000,000% I'm here to play Call of Duty competitive permanently, so that's not necessarily on the table. Then you look at OGLA, and JCap is another one where a lot of people are looking at, right? Because this guy benched off the team a couple of times now, the United squad last season, Simp coming in, and obviously that team won the World Championship without JCap, and yeah, he had most of his success a few years ago, putting up 0.8s nowadays. Not really going to cut it on the top teams, especially in modern Call of Duty when it's super fast paced and all these young guys are just running the scene. So look, can JCap return to a starting lineup? definitely possible, but the concern really is for me that these guys, the last game they were really good at was the World War II days, when the game played pretty traditional Call of Duty, relatively slow, but you could post up on a heady and work it. This game, of course, plays very fast-paced, but most people would have expected it to play kind of like World War II, to be honest. Will the next game, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, whatever it's going to be, play in that similar manner? Will it play slow-paced? Because all the track games we've seen most recently have been fast-paced games where the likes of Aches and JCap just can't keep up, right? And whether that next game will go back to Call of Duty's roots properly and you don't have all this slide cancelling stuff, maybe that will help these guys come up. But if that doesn't happen, and we get another fast-paced Call of Duty like this one is, and of course the players are going to play at a fast pace nowadays, much faster than they used to anyway back in the day, because that's just how the Call of Duty meta has evolved over time in terms of competitive play. If that's the case, I can't really imagine these guys ever making the comeback, but they might stick it out one more season, see how it goes on the next game, and if that doesn't work, then look at next steps, because Jacob could definitely go into coaching on one of these kind of roles, but it's just a kind of sad way to see careers end, because you don't get to see the personalities as much as you would if they were on the analyst desk or something like that, because Nameless is, you know, a pretty notable member of the scene back in the day, but also now everyone gets to hear his opinion on stuff, and it's pretty entertaining. I'd love Aches or maybe even Karma or something in a role like that. So yeah, probably doesn't apply as much to Paris Legion. Seattle, again, is an interesting one, given you've got guys on this team that are probably in the latter half of their career, likes of Apathy. You know, he's done it all again in Call of Duty, so that's what I consider with a lot of these players. Have they accomplished everything they want to accomplish? With Apathy, probably yes, but still, he's definitely interested in playing. He probably has streaming YouTube careers, possibly after the fact, but, you know, if all these guys retire at once, and Enable as well, you could consider, there's not going to be options available for all of these guys, right? And Enable maybe, you know, that gets on with Vicento, maybe Bad Mood Talent, there could be options with him over there, but at the same time, like, what options do these guys have on the table? If they don't have options and you're still a big name like Apathy or Enable, and there's potential starting or substitute lineups ready for next season, why would you not take it, right? Guarantee yourself that paycheck, consider next options in the process, and maybe you'll be good at the game and get starting lineup possibilities, and maybe move on to other, you know, greater and better teams, as we've seen in previous seasons where the likes of Aches had really poor seasons in the Jetpack eras, or at least the latter half of it, Black Ops 3 Infinite Warfare, comes back and win the World Championship, right? It's not out of the question that these guys could do that again. One bad year doesn't necessarily define your entire career. And a similar thing with Looney, really. You could look at this Toronto Ultra team. Yes, of course, he's been around for ages. He's won a lot of stuff. I'm sure he still fancies him winning himself a World Championship, though, certainly as with Enable, right? And yeah, I don't think it's Looney's time to retire as yet. I think probably the most likely are Aches, JCap most likely. And as I said, if next year's Call of Duty game doesn't suit them and it doesn't go so well, definitely I can see retirements coming up. But really, the latter half of this season, the end of this season, I don't see it being overwhelmingly likely, because what next steps do they have on the table unless they get offered something by the CDL or coaching or something in that arena? Intrigued to hear your thoughts on the video down in the comment section below. Just wanted to mention real quick that the CODcast coming up over the next couple of days, Gunless is going to be on it, so that's going to be a spicy one. Keep your eyes out for that. Thanks for watching the video as always. Like if you guys enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. I'll see you next time.